A kind guy paid for a poor girl's meal, unaware she was a millionaire. Days later, love found them. The rain drummed softly against the windows of the small diner, casting a misty glow through the glass. Inside, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the comforting aroma of warm bread and sizzling bacon. Soft jazz played from the corner speaker, blending with the low murmur of quiet conversations from a handful of late-night customers. John sat alone at a corner booth, his grease-stained hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. His worn denim jacket hung over the back of the chair, damp from the rain. The ache in his shoulders lingered from a long shift at the garage, but it was the kind of exhaustion he was used to. Familiar, even comforting. This diner was his sanctuary, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their business. But tonight, something felt different. At the far end of the diner, Natasha sat by the window, her arms folded tightly as she stared out into the rain. Her usual polished confidence was nowhere to be found. She wore a simple gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, far from the designer labels she was accustomed to. She had come here on impulse, desperate for a moment of quiet after a day filled with back-to-back meetings, relentless expectations, and the suffocating weight of the image she was forced to maintain. Tonight she just wanted to be invisible. Her meal sat half-finished, just a bowl of tomato soup and a side of toast. Simple, humble. For the first time in years, she felt normal. But as she reached for her bag to pay, her stomach dropped. The wallet was gone. The waiter, a young man with an impatient frown, approached just as she was rifling through her coat pockets for the third time. "Everything all right, ma'am?" His voice was polite, but the edge of impatience was clear. Natasha's face flushed. She felt the stares of the other customers pressing in on her, the discomfort prickling at her skin. I'm so sorry," she stammered, forcing a tight smile. "I must have forgotten my wallet. I can come back tomorrow and—" The waiter interrupted, clearly unimpressed. "We have a policy. Payment is due before leaving. No exceptions." Natasha swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. From his booth, John watched the scene unfold. At first he thought it was just another awkward misunderstanding, but as the exchange continued, he noticed the tension in her face, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she searched her coat pocket. She wasn't trying to avoid paying, she was genuinely distressed. Without thinking, he stood. "Hey!" John's voice broke through the tension as he approached the counter. Natasha's head snapped toward him, her face pale with embarrassment. John gave her a calm, reassuring nod before turning to the waiter. "I've got it," he said simply, pulling a few crumpled bills from his wallet. Natasha's eyes widened. "No, please, I can't let you— stopping her gently. "It's just a bowl of soup," he said softly. "Really, everyone has bad days. No need to make a big deal out of it." The waiter, clearly relieved, took the cash and walked off without another word. Natasha sat there, stunned. No one had ever done something like that for her before. At least not without expecting something in return. When she finally found her voice, it was softer. "You didn't have to do that. I could have figured it out." John shrugged, offering a small, easy smile. "I know, but sometimes it's nice to let someone else help. Trust me. I've been there." A beat of silence passed between them. Natasha wanted to say more, to explain herself, but the vulnerability felt too raw. She wasn't ready to reveal who she was, or the life she was running from. Tonight, instead, she reached for a napkin and scribbled something down. "Thank you," she said quietly, sliding the folded napkin across the table before rising. John watched as she left, the bell above the door chiming softly behind her as the rain swallowed her figure into the night. He unfolded the napkin. "I owe you. Please let me make this right. Natasha." And beneath it, a phone number. John stared at the note for a long moment, the edges of his lips curling into a soft, curious smile. He didn't know who she really was, and neither of them realized how that simple act of kindness was about to change their lives forever. The rain had finally cleared, leaving behind a crisp autumn breeze as Natasha stepped back into the familiar diner. The cozy warmth welcomed her, the scent of coffee and fresh pastries mingling with the low hum of conversation. She clutched the napkin with John's number scribbled on it, folded neatly inside her coat pocket. The past few days, she had thought about their brief encounter more than she cared to admit. His kindness had lingered with her in a way she hadn't expected. Tonight, she wasn't here out of guilt. She was here to make things right. John was in his usual corner booth, a paperback, novel open in front of him. Though he wasn't reading, his mind kept drifting back to the mysterious woman from the other night. When the bell above the door chimed, he looked up and his heart stuttered slightly. It was her. Natasha approached cautiously, her hands tucked in the pockets of a beige coat, her face softer, less guarded than before. "Hi," she said with a nervous smile. "Do you mind if I join you?" John blinked, caught off guard, but nodded quickly. Sure, yeah, of course." She slid into the seat across from him, resting a plain envelope on the table. "I wanted to come back and thank you properly," she began, her voice steady but gentle. "You didn't have to pay for my meal the other night, but you did, and I appreciate that more than you know." John gave a modest shrug. "It wasn't a big deal. You looked like you were having a tough night. I've been there." Natasha pushed the envelope forward. "I owe you this. Please let me pay you back." John hesitated before taking it, glancing inside to find cash, far more than the cost of a bowl of soup. He frowned, shaking his head. "This is too much." Natasha smiled softly. "Considerate interest, or maybe just my way of saying thank you properly." For a moment, neither spoke. "So, do you come here often?" she asked, attempting to break the awkward silence. John chuckled. "Yeah, it's kind of my spot after work. Helps me unwind." "What do you do?" "I'm a mechanic. Mostly small repairs, oil changes, tire rotations. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills." She nodded, genuinely curious. "Do you like it?" He shrugged, a distant look settling in his eyes. "I do. I mean, I didn't grow up with much, so working with my hands, it's honest, simple. But I guess I've always had this dream of owning my own garage someday, something small, local, the kind of place where people trust you, you know." There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that tugged at Natasha's heart. He spoke not of ambition for wealth, but for purpose. Something she hadn't heard in a long time. "And you?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Natasha hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I'm in business consulting," she said, keeping her voice light. "It's not as fulfilling as what you do, but it helps people in different ways." "I suppose." John nodded thoughtfully, though a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. Their conversation flowed easier after that. They spoke about books, John revealing his love for classic literature, while Natasha confessed she had barely had time to read in years. He shared stories from the garage, funny customer mishaps, and she laughed genuinely for the first time in a long while. Natasha was captivated by his simplicity, how his dreams were so rooted in honesty. And John? He felt drawn to the quiet grace Natasha carried, the way she listened without judgment, as if truly seeing him for who he was. Days passed, and their meetings became more frequent. They'd meet at the diner after work, sharing coffee and stories, laughing over shared jokes. John found himself looking forward to those moments, while Natasha felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. But as their bond deepened, so did Natasha's growing guilt. She wasn't lying, technically, but she wasn't being truthful either. One night, as they lingered over half-empty coffee mugs, John's words caught her off guard. "You know," he said thoughtfully, stirring his drink, "I've met a lot of people who seem to think money fixes everything, but it doesn't. I've seen too many guys with fancy suits who forget what it's like to actually work hard." Natasha's stomach twisted. He didn't know, but his words still stung, not because he was wrong, but because she was part of that world, the one he clearly resented. Later that night, as she lay in her penthouse apartment, staring out at the city lights, Natasha felt torn. Would he still look at her the same way if he knew the truth? Would he still see the woman in the diner, or just the millionaire with the perfect life? He assumed she had. She wasn't sure she wanted to find out. Not yet. The diner was quieter than usual that evening, the rain tapping gently against the windows in a soothing rhythm. John sat at his usual booth, waiting for Natasha. Their meetings had become the highlight of his week. Simple conversations over coffee and pie. Moments that felt so genuine, so real. But tonight she was late. He checked his phone again. No message, no missed calls. Just as he was about to give up and leave, he saw her outside the window. Natasha was standing on the sidewalk, speaking softly to someone, a sharply dressed older man standing beside a sleek black town car. The car, it wasn't just a ride, it was the kind of luxury car you didn't see in this part of town often. John watched as the driver opened the door for her. Natasha offered a polite nod, slipped inside, and the car pulled away, vanishing into the rain-slicked streets. Something felt wrong. John tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just catching a ride home. Maybe she had a friend helping her out. But curiosity gnawed at him. Back at his apartment that night, he opened his laptop and hesitated. Don't be stupid. But the image of that town car haunted him. Finally, he typed her name into the search bar. Natasha Sinclair. The results loaded almost instantly, and what he saw made his stomach twist. CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, net worth $350 million, philanthropist, business mogul. Article after article, photos from galas and charity events. Interviews in Forbes and Business Insider. The woman he'd been meeting for coffee wasn't just in business consulting, she owned a global empire. The next day, John didn't return her calls. Or the next. Natasha, confused and hurt, tried to give him space. She sensed something was wrong, but she had no idea he had discovered her truth. It wasn't until the fourth evening, back at the diner, that John finally showed up, this time unannounced. Natasha had just finished dinner alone, her untouched coffee growing cold, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up, relief flooding her face, until she saw his expression. He looked different, cold, guarded. "John," she breathed, standing. "I've been trying to—" He cut her off, his voice low but tight with emotion. "So, you're not struggling at all, are you?" Natasha blinked, her heart sinking. "What?" He dropped a folded magazine onto the table. It was open to a feature article with her face prominently displayed, the same face she had tried so hard to hide. Natasha Sinclair, The billionaire philanthropist. Natasha, John said. She whispered, reaching for his hand. Please, let me explain. He pulled back, his jaw clenched. Explain what? That you lied? That you pretended to be someone you're not? Was this all a game to you? Tears welled in her eyes. No, I never lied to you. You told me you were just working in business consulting, he interrupted, his voice rising. You let me sit there and tell you everything about my life, my struggles, while you have everything. You're a millionaire, Natasha. Why hide it? Her voice cracked. Because I wanted you to see me, not my money. Every man I've ever met only cares about that, about my wealth, my name. I didn't want you to see that version of me. I wanted you to see who I really am. John shook his head, stepping back. So what? You thought I'd treat you differently? That I'd use you for money? Is that what you think of me? No, she cried, her voice desperate. I was scared you'd see me the way everyone else does. I've spent so long being defined by my last name. I just wanted something real for once. And what we had, it was real, wasn't it? John's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but the hurt was still too raw. I don't know anymore, he whispered. Silence hung thick between them, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down. Natasha reached for him again, her voice trembling. John, please. I care about you. I didn't mean to hurt you. He stared at her for a long moment, his fists clenched at his sides. Maybe you didn't mean to, he said finally, his voice hoarse. But you did. And with that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Natasha standing alone, the rain once again falling softly outside, and this time it felt colder than ever. The days blurred into a quiet, aching void for both John and Natasha. John hadn't returned to the diner since their confrontation. The place that once felt warm and comforting now seemed hollow. A reminder of a connection he wasn't sure had ever been real. He kept his head down at the garage, working long shifts, trying to drown out the thoughts gnawing at him. But no matter how much oil he wiped from his hands, no matter how many engines he fixed, she lingered in his mind. Her laugh, the softness in her eyes when she listened to his stories, the way she made him feel like he mattered. But she was a billionaire, and he was just a mechanic who barely scraped by. At night, he lay, awake in his small, cramped apartment, the silence louder than ever. Maybe she was right. Maybe he wasn't enough. He replayed their conversations in his mind, the raw vulnerability she had shown, yet the pain of being deceived lingered. Was it a lie, or was she scared? Natasha, meanwhile, sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, staring out at the glittering city below. The skyline she once admired now felt like a cage. The rain blurred against the glass, mirroring the ache in her chest. She had checked her phone 100 times, hoping for a message, a sign that John might reach out. But there was nothing, and she was too proud, too scared, to be the first one to break the silence. For years, Natasha had learned to guard herself. Growing up in wealth had taught her that most people were drawn not to who she was, but what she had. The private school friendships that faded when her family stopped hosting galas, the men who courted her name more than her heart. She had built walls because they were safe, because trusting people meant risking hurt. But John had made her believe in something different. And now, she had lost him. Several days later, unable to bear the silence any longer, Natasha made a decision. She needed to show him how much he meant to her, without her wealth, without the image. She needed him to know the truth. After Natasha arrived unannounced at John's garage, the space was dimly lit, the scent of motor oil heavy in the air. Tools were scattered across a worn workbench, and the overhead light flickered weakly. It wasn't glamorous. It was hard, honest work, and it was a reflection of who John was. She spotted him hunched over a beat-up sedan, grease smudged on his hands, and his face tense with concentration. Her heart ached. This was the man who had shown her kindness when she was a stranger, who had seen her, listened to her, long before he knew who she was. And I let my fear ruin it. John noticed her before she could speak. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression guarded. "Natasha," he said quietly, his voice strained. She stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. I didn't come to argue," she began softly, her voice trembling. "I came because I need you to know the truth. All of it." John crossed his arms, trying to mask the emotions twisting inside him. "I think I've heard enough." Natasha shook her head, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "No, you haven't. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, placing it gently on the workbench between them. This explains everything. Please just read it. And if you still want me out of your life after this, I'll go. No questions, no expectations." For the first time, John saw true vulnerability in her eyes. Not carefully measured words, not the poised, distant millionaire, just Natasha, the woman he had once trusted. He stared at the letter but didn't reach for it. Yet. Natasha's voice broke the silence. "I didn't hide who I was because I thought you weren't good enough, John. I was scared. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me the way everyone else does. Like some headline. Not a person. Not me." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. "I wasn't trying to deceive you. I was trying to protect something rare, something I thought we had." John felt his throat tighten, but the words still felt heavy. "And how was I supposed to trust you, Natasha? How was I supposed to believe you when you were living this double life?" She nodded slowly, accepting his pain. "I know, and I can't erase what I did, but I'm here telling you now. Without the walls, without the image." A beat of silence passed. "I care about you, John. I care about you so much," she whispered. She hesitated before adding, "I'll leave you alone now, but please read the letter." And with that, she turned and left the garage, the sound of rain echoing faintly in the distance. That night, after closing up the garage, John finally unfolded the letter. "John, I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant to deceive you. When you paid for my meal that night, it wasn't just kindness. It was the first time in a long time someone treated me like a person, not a name or a paycheck. I've spent so long hiding behind my wealth because people rarely care who I really am. But you did. You saw me before you knew who I was, and I was so afraid that once you found out, it would ruin everything. I've never cared about what you have or don't have. I care about your kindness, your strength, the way you look at life with hope, even when it's hard. I'm sorry I let my fear hurt you, but I needed you to know the truth because you deserve honesty. And I'll keep hoping that maybe we can find our way back to what we had. With all my heart. Natasha." John folded the letter carefully, his heart pounding. For the first time, he saw not the woman on the magazine covers, but the woman who had once sat across from him, sharing stories over coffee. And maybe, just maybe, he had let his pride blind him to what truly mattered. It wasn't about her money, it was him. He had let his own insecurities, his fear of not being enough, poison something real. He had pushed her away, not because she had lied, but because he had been too scared to believe someone like her could truly care about him. And now, he was losing her. The next morning, John woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. He couldn't let this end like it had. He had to make things right. But how? The letter was honest, heartfelt, but she deserved more. She deserved to hear it. A few days later, John stood outside an opulent glass skyscraper, his heart hammering against his ribs. The towering building, the kind of place he had only seen in movies, was intimidating. But tonight wasn't about wealth. It was about her. Inside, the gala was already in full swing. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, the room buzzing with elegant chatter as guests sipped champagne and admired the sleek, modern decor. A live orchestra played softly, adding to the sophistication of the event, and there, in the center of it all, stood Natasha. She wore a deep emerald gown, effortlessly graceful, her hair in soft waves over her shoulders. Yet there was something guarded about her tonight. The smile she wore felt practiced, polite, but not real, because he wasn't there. John adjusted his tie, borrowed from his boss at the garage, slightly wrinkled, and stepped inside. The murmur of the crowd quieted slightly as he entered. His worn dress shoes didn't quite belong on the marble floors, and he could feel the weight of curious eyes on him. He didn't care. His focus was on Natasha. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was speaking with a group of influential figures, nodding at something one of the men was saying. Taking a steady breath, John crossed the room. Natasha's head turned. Her eyes widened in shock. "John?" Her voice was barely a whisper. The entire group fell silent. He stepped closer, ignoring the stares, the whispers. Nothing else mattered now. "I'm sorry for interrupting," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I need to say something to you." Natasha blinked, her lips parting, but no words came. John took another breath, speaking loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "I was wrong, Natasha. I let my own fears get in the way. I told myself I wasn't good enough for you, that you deserved someone who could give you more." His voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on. "But the truth is, I don't care about your money. I never did. I care about you, the person who sits with me over coffee and laughs at my terrible jokes, the one who showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return, the woman who taught me that love isn't about what you have, but who you are." Gasps echoed softly through the room. Tears welled in Natasha's eyes. John took a step closer. "I was scared. Scared that someone like you, someone amazing, could care about someone like me. But I don't want to live with that fear anymore. I don't want to lose you, Natasha." Silence for a heartbeat. The entire world seemed to pause, and then Natasha broke. A single tear slid down her cheek as she whispered, "You were never not enough, John." The crowd melted away as she closed the distance between them, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. When she reached him, her hands trembled as they cupped his face. "You never had to prove yourself," she whispered. "You already were everything I wanted." And with that, she kissed him. Soft, tender, filled with every unspoken word they hadn't said. Applause erupted around them, echoing in the grand hall. But John didn't hear it. All he felt was the warmth of her arms around him, the steady beat of her heart against his. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the wealth, not the headlines, not the differences between their worlds. Just them. Two hearts choosing each other finally. The scent of fresh paint and motor oil filled the air, mingling with the sound of cheerful laughter and the hum of conversation. Sunlight streamed through the large garage doors, casting warm light across the freshly polished floors of Whitmore Auto Repair. Today was the grand opening of John's new garage, a space he had dreamed of for years, and now it was finally real. Balloons swayed gently at the entrance. A handmade banner reading "Grand Opening" stretched across the door. Friends, neighbors, and local business owners had gathered to celebrate. The energy was electric, filled with genuine support and warmth. And standing quietly near the entrance, wearing a simple sundress with her hair cascading in soft curls, was Natasha. She wasn't here as a billionaire, not as a CEO, just as John's partner. Her eyes scanned the crowd, watching John move from person to person, shaking hands, sharing stories, thanking people for being there. There was a lightness to him now, a confidence she hadn't seen before. He had found himself again, and that filled her with more pride than any success she had ever experienced. After their emotional reconciliation at the gala, they had taken things slow. Natasha had offered emotional support, but had made sure John was the one driving his dream forward. She hadn't written him a check or made calls to fast-track his business permits. Instead, she had stood beside him, encouraged him, listened as he brainstormed ideas late into the night. And John, he had poured his heart into this place. From designing the logo to hand-picking the tools and equipment. Everything in the garage reflected his spirit. This wasn't just a business, it was proof that he could build something meaningful with his own hands. A hush fell over the crowd as John stepped onto a small makeshift platform, a pair of oversized scissors in hand. He cleared his throat, visibly emotional as he scanned the faces before him. I'm not much of a public speaker, he began with a nervous chuckle, earning a few supportive cheers from the crowd. But I need to say something today because this moment, it means more to me than I can put into words. He glanced toward the garage, his voice steady but thick with emotion. This garage, it's not just a business to me. It's a symbol of everything I've fought for. For the longest time, I didn't believe I could do this. I told myself I wasn't good enough, that dreams like this were for other people. His eyes shifted, landing on Natasha. And then someone showed me I was wrong. Natasha felt her breath hitch. She didn't just help me dream. She reminded me that love is about seeing someone for who they are, not what they have. She believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And I wouldn't be standing here today without her. A ripple of soft applause echoed through the crowd. John's voice lowered, gentler now. So, to Natasha, thank you. Not for the support or the encouragement, but for showing me that I was enough all along. The crowd burst into applause, the emotion raw and undeniable. Natasha wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, overwhelmed by his words. And when John looked at her, holding out his hand, she stepped forward without hesitation. John's arm wrapped around her waist as he leaned down, pressing a tender, heartfelt kiss to her lips. The crowd cheered louder, but for that brief moment, the world around them faded. It was just them. Two people who had fought through misunderstandings, insecurities, and fear, choosing each other completely. When they pulled apart, Natasha whispered, "You never had to prove yourself to me, John. You were always enough." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "And so were you." The crowd had dispersed, the laughter and music fading into the soft hum of crickets. The garage lights were dim, but the open doors let in the soft hues of a sunset, painting the sky in golds and purples. John and Natasha sat together on a wooden bench just outside the garage, their hands intertwined. No words were needed. They had both found what they had been searching for: peace, love, and the freedom to be exactly who they were. The sun dipped lower and John turned toward her, his voice soft. "What's next for us, Natasha?" She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Whatever we want, together."